regarding people group data and its utilization. There are now some familiar faces and perhaps some new ones being introduced to the community. We've got, make sure I'm looking at the right thing here. We've got Jim, David, Ken, Mike, and Rodrigo. Jim. I don't have last names in this cue sheet here. I think that means Jim Courson. Is that you, Jim, in our next panel?
It is.
It is.
Okay. Let me see. To make up time, David. Is that David Markham again? You think it is?
Yes.
Okay. Let me then go to Ken. Ken, would you tell us just a bit about yourself? We haven't heard from you yet.
Because I'm a much better listener than talker. And I learn more that way. I come at this a little bit different, from a different perspective than many. Been working in mission work for a long time, but it was kind of my passion. I come from a criminal investigation background, and long story short, some years ago, I became very frustrated with the people group data engagement reached. And as I looked at what appeared to be finished product, nobody agreed on anything. It's kind of my assessment.
Yeah.
And
The onion. Sorry.
when Rick Warren took over the FTT role, there was conversations with Mike Latsko and others about this disparity. And I was asked to go verify, find out what can we know for sure. Now, I'll just tell you, my only focus is how do we better mobilize Christ Church. And I love data. I use resources, all of your resources I use daily. But what I actually gather is how can this mobilize the church to people who've never heard about Christ? That's, for me, the only thing that really matters. It's interesting sometimes, but that's my focus. So I began to look at the data and say, who can we look at and verify? A good example I use, because I know Sudan pretty well, one organization had 57 unengaged people groups in Sudan. Another organization had 11, and I assume probably one of them is wrong. So my role, and in my previous career, my job was basically to get people to tell me things they really didn't want me to know. And in the mission world, we have a lot of reasons for security, a lot of reasons for not sharing. There's all good stuff, but the end result is nobody shares, nobody knows. So I began to go and verify information, get as close as possible to the field, and talk to the people who are actually living there, doing the work, talking to locals and say, tell me about this engagement. And we found all kinds of interesting things, like many people don't even agree on what engagement looks like, that sort of thing. And so that's fine. In different cultures, I understand that. But my role is to verify information and try to get, how do we mobilize the church when we're not even really sure where we're going to mobilize them to or where we need to mobilize them to. And my focus is only on the unengaged, those who don't even have a chance to hear about Christ.
Thank you, Ken. Mike has just stepped into the spotlight. Mike, please tell us about yourself and your work.
Thank you, Dan. By way of introduction, I think I have two things on my heart. One is to say that I'm a user of the information that you give. So I've jotted down here, like on Monday, I'm speaking to a group of pastors in my city in the US on the data that I've received from you. And I'm going to use it hopefully to encourage them and to mobilize them in their congregations. Then on Tuesday, I'm going to, some of you may know, Orlando, Florida, where is the US headquarters of Pioneers. So I'm going to be meeting with the Pioneers leadership using the data that I get from you so that they can mobilize their mobilizers. And then I'm going to another state in the United States, Virginia, where I'm from, my home church. I'm speaking to 2 churches there using other sets of data that I get from you to help those pastors vision cast. And then I'm going to Dallas, Texas 2 weeks later, and we'll be talking to East West Ministries, Chris Starr, E3, and beyond, using the data that I get from you. And then I'm coming back to my hometown, which is Phoenix, Arizona in the States. And I'm speaking to my own organization, Frontiers, 40 years old, and rethinking what they should be in this new world. And I'll be using data that I get from you. So that's one person who's using your stuff and these 10 to 12 venues in the next 2 months. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say, how important what you do helps people like me. The second thing, and I don't know that I would have had language to say this had it not been for this meeting today. I probably represent an old school way of conceiving of people groups and binary understanding of the subtleties and nuances that you speak of. So I don't want to misrepresent the local realities that Jim and George and Eldon have spoken of earlier in our meeting. So I don't want to do that. And I don't think anyone who's a general mobilizer like me in a country like the Philippines or Brazil or Germany or Canada would want to minimize the subtleties and nuances that you know best from the field. So I want to learn and I want to honor what those nuances are. So somehow these two, let's hope that these two hands can continue to work together. Thank you.
Great, Mike. Good to hear someone's out there using it. Rodrigo, are you with us here?
Yes. Good morning, brothers. Good to be here with you all. I'm serving with Faith Come by Hearing in Brazil. Faith Come by Hearing ministry is about share audio Bibles everywhere. I'm the national coordinator for Brazil, specific with data and information for mission. I have 4 years of experience in China and now 6 years in Brazil. My goals have always been to organize the data set, how we are talking here, people groups and linguistic groups for the national brothers, to make that data interesting or useful, to answer the questions from the local brothers. I have been trying to help some brothers in Angola, speaking Portuguese, in Latin America, like Guatemala, small countries, to use the data. And what I think I can celebrate, I think we talk about this size Monday, is that the data is getting in the hand of the local, small, national organization. Not like we are giving to them, but they know where to looking for. They know they have access. They have many creative ways to use it. But what I have seen is sometimes they have a lot of data in hands and they don't know how to use, how to do the next step. Just last week, I was with some brothers from different countries from Latin America, also some brothers from South Pacific, Papua Nova Guinea, and they bring a lot of data from all the websites, all the big players here, and they said, okay, I have all this. I don't know what to do next step, what I'm gonna do here. I think that the big challenge from take the data and put the names and last names on it and how to kind of work with it is the big challenge for the small national organization. And what I'm trying is to find, the data champion inside these small organizations. I think we talk about crowdsource, and many other kinds of. It is still a tool. I think we need people and this data champion inside this small organization. Just to give an example how maybe change, I have a different experience from George. We start to see the points in Brazil, we start to see the polygons, but then we start to put again many points because in one people group, they have 600 villages and everybody start to say, oh, they are rich, but from the 600 villages, only 3, the gospel was arrived. So if you look only the polygonal, we lose a lot of people there. And for the last, we are trying to mobilize the local church. We have this challenge for this data champion national for the small organization, but we still have the national church. I think then Mark talk about to the information be in the national language. You need, it's not just translate, is how to make really available in this so many languages that we are working. So, well, thank you. It's good to be here with you all.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I'm going to circle back around here. Jim or David, anything? We've got about 3 minutes left. Anything you want to add here about utilizing this people group data or what these other gentlemen have said?
Well, I appreciate what Rodrigo said about data champions. And I think one of the things we need more data champions in each country who will take a ruthless look at our lists and offer us improvement. I think one of the other challenges we face, and we recognize it, is that we hold an English list that we produce in English on an English-only website, and that doesn't serve the global community very well. So we are in the process of transitioning that into systems that are multilingual, that provide data collection opportunities in a multilingual app for free for users around the world to get more data contributed so that it's less of an English-only perspective or an American-only perspective. So we recognize probably better than a lot of the users the limitations and challenges of our data, and we are eager, as others are, to see them improve.
David, anything?
I'm going to share screen here at this. I don't know if you can see this. This is a list of 3,000 people groups that we were tasked to get together in 2002. And these are the catalogs of people groups that we've divided up into the different Latin American, Ibero-American countries. So this is Honduras, this is Chile, and this is Mexico. So among the 3,000 people subset that we take from you, your data that you give us, we have put those into, divided them up evenly between the countries and given a catalog. And of course, the Brazilian catalog has on their front page the Brazilian people groups. The Mexican catalog has on their front page the Mexican people groups, etc. We've been doing this for since 2001 or 2. And so what we did is we took the 3 global lists and we merged those. And that took a while. But thank the Lord that this 3,000 people group list, 90% of those groups appear on all of the 3 lists. And because we're working with a 3,000 subset, that was easier to do. And we focused on groups under 25,000 in population because a lot of the UPG movements were focused on larger people groups at the time. And so in that process of merging together, we encountered this. like everyone does. And, kind of by accident, we developed this wiki that it's being translated into Portuguese and Spanish and Indonesian, etc. And so there's a tool there that exists, okay, and it works, and you can actually make polygons and maps and things with it. And you could do it in your own language because the Wikipedia is in many languages. However, it's just not pretty. It does fit on a cell phone now, thanks to the developers of Wikipedia. And, I've offered to take the logo off and put whatever logo we want on there so that we can crowdsource and work together and use it. A grandmother can get in and use Wikipedia or Etnopedia, or a child could get in and use the system. It's that simple. But anyway, we provide this data to CMIWC, which is the Spanish and Portuguese speaking missionary movement. And we use that. I think we've given out 20,000 plus of these catalogs. And in the catalog, there's the link to the website and a link to your national coordinators who are heads of the Adopt a People campaign. And so we're using the data, and we're trying to get it out into hands of people who are going to send, and even the people who are going to go.
Great. Thank you, guys. Considering your broad range of involvement and experience that you have with mission information data, I'd like to open the floor now to anyone who might have some questions or comments about what has been begun here. Please use either the chat to type your question or the Zoom feature of raising your hand so that you can unmute. And if you're familiar with how to do this, just look at the bottom of your Zoom window and find an icon that looks like a little smiling face with a small plus above it. Yep. And it says reactions, and then click raise your hand. And you'll see a hand in the corner of your window. And please remember, if you're called on, to lower it as we complete the responses to your questions, so that with your hand raised, you'll stay visible to everyone as well during the discussion of your item. And remember to keep these short. We have, let me check my time, we have about 9 minutes for this. So the floor is open. I see a hand from Stephanie Kraft.
Question for Eldon. Eldon, if you could direct our community to take 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps toward reaching the vision that you cast for us, what would they be?
We're in a time of transition. Information is not always used to apply to go, to send, and yet most of the discussion in the perspective is that. I think it's just a process of understanding, where are the unreached people? Where is God using it? The Rohingya and the Pashtun, the Brazilian church is involved in this to a huge degree in Brazil. So how do we connect the different parts of the body of Christ? I think the only thing I would suggest is we need to encourage an awareness of what God is doing, that he is working. And he doesn't work just down our lines, our thinking. I don't think he's against unreached list, people groups listing and all that. I really don't think. I think it's great. But let's realize that Christ is working in and through his church all over the world. And the people we're trying to reach are now all over the world. They're not staying in little geographic regions anymore. I think it's a mind shift that we need to have. But if we start collecting the information on different ones, we're starting to do it on the Uyghur, on the Rohingya, on the Pashtun, Somalis, different ones. But it requires collaboration, and it requires looking to what God is doing, how he is working. He works outside of our boxes all the time. And that just interrupts my thinking. But anyway, it's neat to be a part of that. So I don't think there's a simple 1, 2, 3 step.
One step that I think we need to start to look more, and we are, because I think we have a lot of data, good data, like hard information system to make connections is wonderful. But I think we need to look more how to share the data for the local church. I'm talking about data viz or visualization. Lists is so complicated for the local church. I think we need to improve how we share, not between us, but between with the church, the information. I think we still being so complicated the way we share.
Right. Danny Weiss, your hand's been up. Thank you. You're on.
Yeah, thank you. Increasingly, I'm finding that there are discrepancies in data sources, not necessarily because the data is wrong or because one source is right and another is wrong, but just because the data systems that we have don't and can't account for non-binary or fluid continuums or multiple identities of things. So you have all this fuzzy data in reality, and our data systems are unable to capture that. How might we begin to redesign our data structures and data systems to begin to better capture the reality that the world, the reality in the world with this fuzzy data?
You know, I'm a database administrator. I went to college for it. And I think that's some of our problem at the technical level, and us who do this research and work with the data every day. We're very database focused. And to get people involved in giving us more clear data, you know, we need to kind of simplify this process for them. Of course, all that data goes up into a database. You know, I'm promoting my heart here, but this is a people group profile in Spanish. It's also translated into German and English. An unreached people group in China, no Bible translation. And we have 2 maps here of where they're located. But if you zoom out here, these are polygons for China. They can be edited by anyone. You don't have to be a GIS master's degree to put a polygon on a map. And these are status of evangelical Christianity. And so the tools are there. I'm not saying that this is the tool, but I think we do, like Andrew Fang was saying, we have the technology. Are we willing to come together? You know, we could just continue on to work isolated in our own systems and develop these very elaborate systems where all the data flows up to somewhere up in the sky. If I put this people group profile and map on my portal in Russian or in Hindi or Telugu, I'm taking ownership of that. See, it's a thing that I contributed to the community. Okay, well, it's not a database that can be sorted and filtered. Well, it can, but nevertheless, the data is actually something that we need to have the people involved in that process so that they take ownership of it. I work with databases, and our databases have REST APIs that tap straight into the IMB and straight into the Joshua project. We see the data live. We have progress.bible, all of this fancy stuff. And we're trying to get people at the ground level involved in things that they may not have a computer that will do that for them. Or, okay, I have an app on my phone and I just click send and it goes up into the cloud, and where does it go and what do they use it for? Is it useful to me? Am I making it useful to me? The Russians translated the Russian people groups into Russian, and they went out into the field to get the data for themselves. They made their own maps. And the maps and the language names, someone put in the chat, the language names, all of that is translated into the Russian language for the Russian missionary mobilization in Russia. It's not really for us at the English level. Now I can look at their profiles and take those scales off and put them on the English profile because they got them in the field. And, you know, it's not a database system that runs off of an app and that contributes into this thing we can sort and filter at the high level. It's just simplified down for normal users.
Great questions. Thank you, David. It looks like you answered the next question I had queued up here from Bob about the languages and so forth. Bob, do you think we've dealt with your question adequately? I think we've got about half a minute left.
Yes, thank you. I'm really struck by making our data more accessible to not just English speakers, but speakers of all languages that are interested in missions. And I'm just wondering if there is a database where I could go in and scoop out a big chunk of data, language codes, along with the names of the languages in other languages other than English.
Thank you, Bob.
I think the Joshua Project has a downloadable database, and I'm not for sure they've translated the language names. Pretty much across our data sets, language name is people group name. There are not very many people who have two ethnic groups that speak one language. So you could get that translation downloading the Joshua Project Microsoft Access database, probably on about 8,000 people groups. 8,000 of the 10,000, it's a one-to-one relationship. Language is the people group. Not always is the language name the people group name. But nevertheless, the Joshua Project has columns of the different translations into other languages, those people group names.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You have to sort and filter that.
Mark, I see your hand. I'm afraid we need to move on. If you've got a question that could be dropped into the chat for somebody to pick up later and respond to, that would be great. Thank you, panelists. Great to have your voices speaking into these issues.